What is milk ejection reflex? It is when the baby suckles the breast of the mother that leads to ejection of milk from the breast. So this reflex is mediated by oxytocin, and this reflex is an example for neuroendocrine reflex. So why is it called a neuroendocrine reflex? That we'll know when we learn the pathway. So here I've drawn this schematic picture of breast. So when the baby suckles the breast, the touch receptors present in the areolar region will be stimulated. So this receptors will send, once it is stimulated, it sends signal to the CNS via the ascending pathway, sensory pathway. So the sensory fibers, afferent fibers, will carry this information to the CNS, to the sensory cortex. So along the pathway, the fibers tends to give collateral to another CNS structure, that is hypothalamus. So these collateral fibers will stimulate the hypothalamic nuclei. Two specific nuclei in the hypothalamus will be stimulated. One is paraventricular nucleus. In short form, it is PVM, and another nucleus, supraoptic nucleus. So when these two nuclei is stimulated, that it will produce oxytocin. And once the oxytocin is produced, the oxytocin would be stored in the nerve terminals present in the posterior pituitary. And from there, the oxytocin will be released into the circulation. The released oxytocin in the circulation, it is going to act on the breast tissue. Specifically, it is going to act on the myoepithelial cells. So what is this myoepithelial cell and where is it present? So if you see the breast tissue, it contains glands and adipose tissue. So when you see the glands, an exocrine gland, which means it will have acinar portion and duct. And the duct will end in the nipple. So if you take a portion of the gland and see, this is the acinar portion. So where there is an inner lining called epithelium, and there is surrounding layer of cells that is called myoepithelial cell. So why is it called myoepithelial cell? These are basically modified smooth muscle and has tendency to contract. So whenever it contracts, it tends to squeeze or eject the content present within the acinar cells. And here it is the milk that is produced within the acinar. So once it reaches the duct, from the duct it will be ejected from the breast through the nipple. So this is this reflex. So now the stimulus for this reflex here is the baby suckling. So baby suckling is the stimuli for the reflex. And the receptors that is stimulated are the touch receptors in the areola. The afferent fibers are the sensory afferent and the collaterals. The center here is the hypothalamus, paraventricular nucleus and supraoptic nucleus, and the efferent here is the hormone, that is oxytocin. The effector cell on which the oxytocin acts is the myoepithelial cell, and the effect that is produced here is the milk ejection. So this completes this milk ejection reflex. So now what is the significance of this reflex? So if you see, generally any reflex, both afferent and efferent limb would be of neural. But here if you see, afferent is neural, but whereas the efferent is hormonal. That is, it is mediated by oxytocin. So that is why it is called as neuroendocrine reflex. So one afferent is neural, efferent is hormonal. That is why it is neuroendocrine reflex. So another significance about this reflex is, every time the baby suckles the breast, more and more milk would be ejected. So this is an example for positive feedback mechanism. So you have to remember an important thing when it comes to milk production and milk ejection. That is, the hormone released from the anterior pituitary, that is prolactin, is involved in milk production, galactogenesis. Whereas the hormone released from the posterior pituitary, oxytocin, that is involved in milk ejection. So this thing should not be confused. So you should keep this in mind. Prolactin for milk production and the other one oxytocin for milk ejection. So what are the factors that would promote this milk ejection reflex? So the thought of the baby, the cry of the baby would promote or it will stimulate this reflex. And what would inhibit this reflex? Any kind of drug abuse in the mother, or if the mother is stressed, both these things is going to inhibit this reflex, and thereby it would also affect the breastfeeding. So it is very important that the mother is very happy and she's not depressed in order to promote breastfeeding. So just to recap, so here the stimuli here is the baby suckling. The receptor is the touch receptor present in the areola. The afferent is the sensory afferent and the collateral fibers. And the center here is the paraventricular nuclei and supraoptic nuclei of hypothalamus. And the hormone produced is the oxytocin, and that oxytocin will be released from the posterior pituitary. So the efferent limb is oxytocin, and the effector on which it is going to act is the myoepithelial cells that surrounds the epithelial cell in the acina portion. And this myoepithelial cell has tendency to contract. So when it contracts, it helps in ejection of milk. The effect is the milk ejection. So that is about this milk ejection reflex.